Hello everyone! Today I'm going to do a houseplant tour and take you around and show you all of the houseplants that I'm growing. I'll also give you information as far as how often I water, how far away from a light source they are. But to give you a bit of a background as far as why I currently have the selection of houseplants that I have, let me tell you a little bit about my houseplant journey over the last few years. And if you want to skip this and go straight to the tour, I will have timestamps down below. So I think it was either 2017 or 2018 that I got my first houseplant, which started my whole houseplant addiction. I actually got 2 plants from Gethsemane Garden Center here in Chicago, and I still have those 2 plants, so I'll point those out when I get to them. But just like with gardening, because I wasn't as into gardening yet at this point, I needed all of the houseplants. I needed any type, any new color. I was getting a lot of very small plants too, because that's a lot cheaper than getting large plants, but it became overwhelming. And I would notice that I wasn't looking forward to taking care of more of the plants over time, and also a lot of them died when I did start focusing on the garden. And I also found that I was starting to curate the room around the houseplants that I have, like getting additional shelving, getting additional tables, instead of the houseplants really being a part of the decor and fitting them into the room and whatever purpose I use the room for. So over time I shifted away from as many plants as possible to the plants that really fit into the environment and I guess complemented the room. Also, plants that fit the environment that I have instead of forcing plants to be happy that aren't. So at our last place where the houseplant addiction started, we had giant south-facing windows, which let in the most light. So I could grow a lot more plants that really loved direct light compared to what I have now. Because now we have east and west-facing windows, so there isn't really, I'll show you our south-facing windows in a second, but there really isn't any south-facing light that's coming into our house. So a lot of the plants that really like a bit more light did not thrive here. So I finally gave in, and now I feel like I'm at a good place with houseplants that 1, don't require a lot of maintenance, and 2, actually fit into the space instead of me trying to make the space fit in with the plants. I also have a lot fewer houseplants now in 2025 than I did back in 2018. And because of that, since I'm not purchasing as many plants, when I do go to purchase a houseplant, which I really don't do that often anymore, I will opt for a larger size because yes, the larger sizes are more expensive, but if I'm getting 1 larger plant that is already much taller and I don't have to wait as long for it to grow versus 3 or 4 smaller plants that were the same cost, this now makes sense for me. But don't forget, you can divide and propagate your plants, which I have a lot of plants in here that are propagated, which technically means they're free, and I'll be sure to point those out as well. So let me take you around and we will start. Actually, first, I will give you an idea of the lighting in this room so you can see my lighting, maybe compare it to yours, and whether these plants might work or not. I'm currently standing as far back as I can in this room, and the main source of light are these 3 windows, which are really the size of doors. 2 of them are doors, but these face east. So the morning sun comes in through these windows, and then we do have, again, 2 south-facing windows, which would let in a lot of light if they weren't looking directly at our neighbor's house. So in the city, not necessarily a lot of space between you and your neighbors, so we have windows, but they face a brick wall. Now it does let a little bit of light in. You can see the ray of sunshine coming in through there, but not anywhere near enough to have a direct sun plant in my south-facing windows. So this is the main source of light. And then in this corner, I do have a grow light. This is a Soltech grow light that I have had for many, many years now. And I use this for any of the plants that really do need more direct light that this room just can't provide. So I would say that this table is really the only space where I've kind of mentioned earlier that I have the table and the light in here for the plants versus the plants just fitting in with the room. But I love the plants that are here, and I will show you them also in a second when we get there. But those are all of the light sources I have in this room. When it comes to lighting that plants require, you'll see similar light qualifications as you would see with plants in the garden, like full sun, part sun, full shade. Here, usually they'll be listed as direct light, indirect light. I don't really know if there's any other categories, but I naturally do not have any areas that I would consider to be direct light unless I add the grow light to it. So I've stopped growing many of those plants except for my very, very favorites, and have incorporated more plants that can do, low light, indirect or low light. What the actual difference is between those two definitions, I do not know, but I know that anything that requires a lot of light does not thrive in my home now. But I'm gonna start over here against my gallery wall, and I'll show you some of that as well, because it is all garden or pigeon themed art that I have up there. But this is probably, I would say, the plant that's furthest away from any source of light, the windows, the grow light. This is a ZZ plant that I have had since we moved, so at least since 2019. It started off very small. I have divided it a couple times and given some of these away to friends, but this is a fantastic plant if you are in a low light environment. All of the plants that I'm going to show you have been in their spots for at least a year, if not 2, 3, or 4 years. So I know that they are happy in the places that they are. Also, if I have a house plant and it's not happy, I will just try moving it somewhere else. But this is probably one of the oldest plants in here. It is in a ceramic pot that I used to use outside, but this is heavy. And it was a pot that I couldn't leave outside because it might crack from the cold weather and the rain. So I decided to stop using it in the garden and then have it as a houseplant pot where it can safely stay inside all year round. And because it's heavy, I did the same thing I started doing in the garden, and I put it on wheels. I don't have wheels on everything. There are some plants I want to add some to, but this just makes it super easy. Not that they move around a lot, but even if I just want to turn it so that different areas of it are facing the light, which I probably need to do with this one because this side isn't nearly as happy. It's just much easier to maneuver around if I ever need to. So I also recommend not only wheels in your garden, wheels on your houseplants as well. But again, this is a ZZ plant. I don't know the specific variety. It seems to be just like the regular standard ZZ plant, but I love it. It has shiny leaves. I watered this because it's in a larger pot and it doesn't require as much water. I would say maybe once a month at the most, a little bit less frequently in the winter maybe, and I'll just, again, stick my finger in, and if the soil is dry a few inches down, I'll give it a water. But this is one of the plants that I do water the least. It's not the one I water the least overall, but maybe like second or third. Over here, I have my cordyline, which probably could use more attention than I give it. Oh, that's another thing I want to mention. So I basically ignore my houseplants during the garden season. So like May through November, I'm just watering them, maybe fertilizing once a month if I remember to. So these are also plants that so far have lived through my neglect for many, many years. So if you're looking for low maintenance, lower light plants, that is what I'm going to be giving you today. But this again is a cordyline. I've had this for at least 2 years. I have, I think, potted it up one time, but I do think I need to focus more on like dusting off the leaves. This one I'd say gets watered like on average. So I'm watering maybe once every 2 weeks, all of my house plants. Again, maybe I can push it to 3 in the winter, but I have killed many more house plants from overwatering than underwatering. So I do go for underwatering. And if I see that some of my plants need an extra boost of water in between, then I will do that. Now this one is next to a window, but again, that's the window that faces the brick wall. So it's not like it's getting a lot more light than the ZZ plant at all. And again, I think it's doing really well. I just think it's probably not quite as low. It's not a high maintenance plant at all, but I don't think it's quite as low maintenance as the ZZ plant, for example. But I love it. And I really wanted something taller in this area, but of course you have to worry about transporting the plants that you get from the garden center. So I think I got this because it was the tallest, well, I think the cheapest and tallest combination together. Those two qualities led me to the cordyline. So I really like it. I'm hoping it gets taller. I will probably have to repot it. And when I do, I want to add wheels because it is not currently on wheels and it is in a ceramic pot. If I don't have a pot on wheels and there is a drainage hole, I just put a plastic saucer under it. Not terracotta, unless it's sealed, but even then I don't know if I trust it because plastic is much less porous. It's not going to let the water through like terracotta can, and I'm trying not to damage the floors that we have in our house. Now I know technically these aren't houseplants, but I do want to show you some of the pictures that I have here on my gallery wall, which I've been adding to slowly over time. First, let's start on this side. I do have a pigeon print. from actually the pigeon book that I have. This is just a print from one of the pages. I think it's really pretty. It doesn't quite fit in this frame, but we're working with that for now. I think you can tell, but I really just love floral illustrations. So here is, I don't know where I got this from. I think I got it from a local business in Chicago. And then what else do I have? This one I really, really love. I also got it from a local vintage shop, but this is a print from a book whose name I cannot remember off the top of my head, but it's written over, I think, in the 1800s, so over 100 years ago. And it was a book that was kind of making fun of floral illustrations. So this one is an illustration of rose, but in human form. I have some pressed flowers that I got, again, from just a local garden center. And then this was the first butterfly that I saw in the garden last year, the Red Emerald. So I wanted to get a print of it. And I think I'm going to make that an annual tradition of whatever the first butterfly or insect that I see in the garden, I'm going to try to see if I can find a print. And I believe this was from Etsy. None of these prints are expensive. They are $20, I think, or under. Framing is probably a little bit more expensive than the actual prints. And then I just recently got these off of Etsy from an artist in, I think it was Turkey, maybe. But I wanted to add some smaller frames in here, and I think that was perfect. I think that one was labeled as violets, but I can't remember off the top of my head. These, though, I know are lily of the valley, because that is the flower for May, which is when I was born. So I wanted to get a small frame of that. And then she also sent a second small frame. So I now have two of those, and I love them very much. I have another pigeon print. I have a print of wheat. This print I got in Nice from a bookstore, so it's fun to look back on that and remember when I see that painting. This is another one from the book that kind of makes fun of floral illustrations. This one is Narcissus, and she's, I believe, gazing at herself in the water. And then this was just something I found at a thrift store, like an etched into wood floral thing. But I liked it, so that's what's on this wall now. And my plan is to completely cover this wall as much as possible. Oh, and this I just made from test tubes, hot glued into an old candelabra. And this is where I propagate, usually more in the summer, propagate my pothos strands to create new plants. Or sometimes I will just put water and flowers in here as little vases. This I just recently switched up. So I put a shelf in here above the couch. The shelf has been here for a while. I used to have a plastic flower box with a bunch of philodendron and pothos vines, but I just kind of got over it. It didn't cover the flower box in the way that I'd hoped, so you could still see it beneath the vines. So what I'm going to try to do, and this I really just changed this up in the last month, but my plan is to have the vines start to trail down and then trail them along the wall. So up around the mirrors and just create basically a wall of leaves. So here I have, again, I don't know the variety, but this is kind of your basic pothos. I have a neon pothos, which is more of a yellowy green. And then I have a philodendron, which again, I don't know the specific varieties, but it's kind of your standard philodendron. I like the look of the terracotta pots up here. I think I'm going to stay with that. I just don't know exactly what I'm going to do with this section, but I do like the idea of just having a whole wall covered in vines. We are slowly getting closer to the window, although these plants don't necessarily need to be this close in order to still thrive. I have here two snake plants, or mother-in-law tongue plants. These are fantastic for low light placement. In fact, usually when I'm going around and there's different restaurants or even at a pickleball place by us, if people have plants inside or in an office, you're probably going to find the snake plant in there because, again, it doesn't need that much light in order to survive. If it does get more light, it will grow much faster, but they won't die if you do have them in lower light situations. This one here is one of the very first plants that I got from Yosemite. So this has been with me since the beginning, kind of kicked off this whole houseplant addiction of mine. I have divided it at least 2 or 3 different times, again, to give pieces away to friends. But now I think I am just going to let it thicken out. I also love the planter it's in. I don't know if it's supposed to be a planter. I got it at a thrift store and now it is a planter, but I just have the nursery pot sitting inside of it on a saucer. It's not actually planted in that container because there is no drainage. I have this snake plant, which I have no idea where I got you from, but I like having it on the table. I like tucking these into areas where they're not going to take up a lot of horizontal space. So it's not like this is hitting me in the face when I'm sitting on the couch. It definitely grows much more vertically. These are the plants I water the least. Snake plant. In fact, I was told when I got this to not water unless you lift up. In fact, let me do it and try not to spill dirt everywhere. But their recommendation was lift up the nursery pot, stick your finger instead of in the top, stick your finger in the bottom, and if it feels wet, don't water. If it feels dry, do water. This still feels wet, so I'm not going to water it. But that really, I think, is one of the main ways that snake plants die is getting too much water. And what makes that a little bit more difficult is often the signs of too much water in a plant is very similar to the signs of not enough water. So if your plant is drooping, it doesn't necessarily mean it needs more water. It could have too much water and the roots are rotting and the plant is dying. So always, again, err on the side of underwatering because it's much easier to add water than it is to try and take it away from your plant. And then over here is another plant that I feel like has done really well. So I have a few of these too, but this is a parlor palm. And I just really like the look of it. It looks like a fern to me, even though it's technically a parlor palm, but I like the shape of this. And I would say it's probably really bad at estimating height, 8 feet away from the window. So that's the light that it gets. What I also like is that I used a glass plate. So I saw this on Instagram a couple of years ago of people looking for vintage plates to use as saucer, which again, vintage plates can be really, really cheap, like a couple dollars per plate. And they are also not porous, so they make great saucers that are also pretty. So any place that I have plants where it's a bit more out in the open and you can see the saucer, I will use, for the most part, the glass plates that I have. I think they're really pretty. But this, again, is a parlor palm, which I need to get better at rotating my plants so they grow evenly on all sides. This probably, again, gets watered on average. It is in a smaller pot compared to some of my other plants. So I'm probably watering this one also once every 2 weeks. Then I have this philodendron, which I absolutely love, trailing down this plant stand that, again, I think my aunt actually found this at an antique store or a garage sale and knew I would like it, and I do. But this pothos I've had for years, trimmed it plenty of times and propagated it. In fact, this might actually be a propagation from one of my original plants that I got. But this one, I just love that it kind of trails down and just looks like a waterfall of green leaves. And it also gets moved around a lot. So right now it is next to the window, even though the sun's not directly hitting it, because the sun is kind of coming from that angle. So most of the light that shines through goes that way. But right now it is right next to the window. I think I moved this over here for the Christmas tree, but sometimes it'll be over there. Sometimes I'll pop it wherever I need to get out of the way. When I do start hanging my flowers here to dry, this will definitely move, but that won't be until June, July, when I start harvesting those. But I just think this one's really pretty. It's probably, like, visually, I think one of my favorite plants that I have. This is an Aglaonema, and the variety is Silver Bay. This was the other plant, besides the snake plant, that I got back in 2017 from Gethsemane. So this also kicked off my addiction. I have, again, divided, repotted this a number of times. In fact, I might need to divide again, and I might make 2 separate plants from this, but I just love the print on the leaves. I'm looking around, and I would say more of the leaves I have are solid colors, but I do love a variegated leaf. And I like that this one is a bit more of like a bluey gray color, but this has been a very low maintenance plant for me. I water this, it isn't again in a larger pot, on wheels. I water this a little bit more often than my ZZ plant. Maybe I'm doing every 3 weeks for this one. And again, with all my house plants, I water until the water comes out the bottom. And my ZZ plant, maybe I'm doing it again 1 to 2 weeks longer in between waterings. But I really love this one, and I love it just tucked in up here against the side of my table. But yeah, I think I need to do some dividing of this plant because I think it is crowding itself out of the pot. Now, if I'm going for all-time favorite plant that I have in my house, it's probably this one right now just because it has grown so much since I got it. I'm pretty sure this one I got in 2019 as well. It's a Hoya carrii, and I just got it as 1 heart, which you'll probably see this a lot, especially around Valentine's Day, where there'll be a little like 4-inch pot with 1 heart in it. It sometimes does this and produces a bunch more leaves, but a lot of the time it doesn't. So you can't guarantee, depending on how the plant was cut and potted up, you can't guarantee that a Hoya carrii will actually start to vine. But I would say you're probably more likely to get one that'll vine, and go to a garden center and ask. You're probably more likely to get one that will start to vine out at a garden center versus like Home Depot or Target, where they just have these on sale for Valentine's Day. But I don't even know. So this obviously likes a little bit more light, which is why it's over here. I need to repot it. I'm nervous to even breathe too hard around it because I feel like it's gonna fall over. Although Jack the cat sits here and he has never knocked it over, which is surprising. And on that, I think I've mentioned this before in a video, but my cats don't bother my houseplants. There are plants that can be toxic to cats. I don't know why. They haven't bothered my houseplants. They have not bothered the dried flowers that I have on the ground either. They've broken a bunch more other stuff in the house. For some reason, houseplants, they just don't care, and I don't know why. Moving on over to my work table here. The only plant that I currently have on is this Aglaonema, which I believe, it didn't say the variety when I purchased it, but I believe based on Google image search, this is the variety Maria. Again, I love the variegation of the leaves. This is more like traditional green coloring versus the kind of more cool-toned green of the Silver Bay. But I love this. And similar to gardening, when I started with houseplants, I wanted one of every type I could find. But now I've really narrowed it down to the types of plants I know work well in my environment, which makes it a lot easier and lower maintenance for me. Also, I don't know, so someone mentioned on a different video, they wanted me to talk about the horsehair basket. I don't know if that's this or not, but this container is from a thrift store. I think this was from one in Chicago. And again, because of that, it's actually in its nursery pot. But because the pot is so much shorter, I have all of this in there. So I have an upside down nursery pot. I have the saucer so that the water doesn't get all over the basket. I would never plant in this. I don't think it wants to be constantly soaked in water. And then on top of that, I have the Aglaonema. This is the oldest pothos that I have in my house. It's actually the third oldest plant that I have behind the Aglaonema and the snake plant. I cannot tell you the number of times I have divided and trimmed and propagated. In fact, the pothos that you saw on the shelf above my couch, it's from here. You'll see another pothos, also from this plant. So I think I've only purchased one of each variety of pothos that I have. And then if you see a second one of the same variety, it's because I propagated it. But I love how this trails down the entire side of my bookcase. I just trim it every time it hits the bottom. I propagate those trimmings and I put them somewhere else. It's currently in an 8-inch terracotta pot. It could probably stand to be potted up into a 10-inch. But I got this from Home Depot and it was covered in either white flies or spider mites. I can't remember now because it was years ago. But I have much more often had issues with pests coming into my house with houseplants when I get them from Home Depot, for example, versus a garden center. I think the garden centers are just more on top of pest control. On that note, anytime you bring a new houseplant into your house, I wouldn't put it right nearby your other houseplants for a couple of weeks, just in case you want to control it separately before the pests swarm all of your other plants. In terms of pests, I don't get a lot of pests, but I have had some. I know I've had fungus gnats, which can be from overwatering your plants. And as I've gotten away from that, I haven't had issues with fungus gnats. I had scale. I'm trying to think. I definitely have had spider mites. I think that's probably it though. And all of those plants that were more prone to pests, I don't think I have those anymore. So I can't remember the last time, I'm gonna jinx myself, I can't remember the last time I found a pest on one of my houseplants. So this is really the last section of this room where I have houseplants. I have a philodendron here. So the philodendron by the window was propagated from this philodendron. Again, as it kind of starts to get in the way of things, I will trim it and propagate those vines. It doesn't need to be this close to a grow light, it just happens to be positioned there. And then under here, I have some plants. Some are doing better than others. I have a morning glory which I attempted to grow. I mean, it is growing inside. It just looks very, very unhappy, but it's not dead. So until it completely dies, I'm gonna let it grow. And then let me take you in closer to show you the other plants that I have here. On this table here, along with the very sad looking morning glory, I have Campanula bellflower. This does have white flowers. Anything that I want to encourage more flowering on will stay under this grow light, which is why I have my African violet here, which is in this cute little pot that I got from a garden center in Chicago. I can't remember which one, but isn't it cute? It's definitely not waterproof, so I have the nursery pot in there with a saucer, but I just think that's adorable. And this used to sit on my work table, but since moving it underneath my grow light, it has flowered so much more regularly. It's not in flower right now. You can see some are just at the tail end there, but putting it under a grow light really changed how well this plant performed. And then lastly, I have one of my favorite plants, which is String of Hearts. It's the variegated String of Hearts, which means it's pink. And the leaves are heart-shaped. I had so many of these when we were at our last place with the south-facing windows. But because, again, it doesn't really love the environment we're in now, this is the only one I have, I think. And I used to have so many. I've propagated so many, but that is my String of Hearts. I mean, it's pink and full of hearts. How can you not love it? Those are all the houseplants I have in this room. Now I'm going to take you over to my office right through that door because I do have a few extra plants in there. Welcome to my office. If you don't know, I do work from home. I do digital marketing. I've been an at-home worker since 2015, so I guess a decade now, which is crazy, but it is nice to have my own space that is pink and filled with all of the things I love, which is mostly plants. Behind me here, this is a pothos. This is a propagation from the pothos that's out there on the right corner of my library. The plan for this one's in a hanging basket, is to trail it along the walls here. I kind of want to trail the vines between the paintings on this gallery wall, so I do also have a gallery wall here, some pressed flowers from my garden, some more flower art, because when I like something, you will know it because it will be everywhere. But this is just a little chaise lounge that I will sit on sometimes. Usually I'm at the desk, but sometimes I will work on here too. I realized I didn't go over the lighting situation of this room, but basically I have these two window doors that face the west. So the sun does come through here in the afternoon. I again have the two south-facing windows that face the brick wall. The pigeons sometimes sit in, but this room is definitely darker, I feel like, than the main room. Neither of the rooms are bright, but this one is definitely a little bit darker. So I do have grow lights in here as well that I'll show you. This plant here, which I really do like, even though it makes a mess, is, I think it's Ficus benjamina or Benjamin ficus. I really wanted a tree in here, especially up against this door, because I don't really ever use this door. I'm always using the one here on the right. I did think I was killing it. It has been alive here for over a year, if not two, but because every time you shake it, leaves fall out. And I figured that wasn't a good sign, but then impatient gardeners show that that happens with hers too. That I think she moves hers inside and outside throughout the season. It does want a little bit more light, which is why I do have it up against the windows here. It could probably stand to have a little bit more light. I also have down here some ivy. I really love ivy. I think it just looks beautiful, again, trailing down. It kind of reminds me of like maybe an old house that's been abandoned for decades and there's just ivy covering it all. So I really love having this plant. It's probably one that I water the most. People have asked me how I don't kill my ivy. I did kill an ivy from forgetting to water it. But now I got a new one a couple months ago and I just water these probably once a week. So this, I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I don't think there's anything else that gets watered once a week. Just my ivy, which is again on a thrifted plate. That is dirty, but that's okay because it's a plant saucer. Then I have another ZZ plant. This is the Raven ZZ plant. It is very, 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 very dark green, almost black, and it will be darker in more light, but I love this. Again, ZZ plants work really well. I like it in this bucket that I have it in, so it's in a nursery pot in this bucket, and I love having that vertical height because I realized most of my plants do tend to trail down. So it's nice to have some plants in here that actually give vertical height to the space. This right here is my newest plant addition. I didn't mean to get another houseplant, but I found this pot for a really good price at a thrift store. So once you have a pot, you have to get a plant, and then you have to get soil, and then that cycle just continues on forever. But I put in here a parlor palm because, again, I know that it works really well in my environment. And this actually does get a little bit more light than where the smaller one is out in the other room. So I know that it should do really well. It's in a nursery pot still because this does not have drainage. I also do have it on wheels because it is a bit heavier of a pot, but again, not like I move these around that much, although this one might have to be moved around depending on how far open I need the door and what I'm going to carry in and out. So wheels will be helpful. I love this pot so much, and I knew I wanted a plant that didn't cover the pot, and because it's in the corner where the door needs to open, I needed something that could be okay with a door hitting it that grew a bit more vertically. So I think this was the perfect plant for this spot. I think this is probably my favorite corner of my office. I love all parts of it, but I absolutely love what the plants are doing over here. Now I wanted to show you, I do have grow lights in here. They are Sansi grow light bulbs in just a lamp that I got off of Amazon, because I tend to find that the lamps that grow lights come with aren't necessarily prettiest lamps. So I can get separate bulbs and then put them in a lamp that I like. That seems to be the best option. But I am going to turn this off just so you can see what the plants look like without the light bulbs glaring at you. This is a Red Emerald Philodendron, which I love so much. And you know what? I haven't given her a name, and I feel like she definitely deserves one. So let me know a name for this philodendron down below. But again, it's Red Emerald. The leaves are green. The stems are red. I got this last March in Geneva at a plant store there. And it came with a moss pole, it came with a piece of wood, which ends here. So that's how tall the plant was a year ago. Everything else has happened since. And I have been cobbling together more supports in here. I didn't do anything with the supports the right way for this plant, but it's doing what I wanted to do. So that's going to be good enough for me. I want to have, again, trailing vines all over this wall. So I'm hoping to get it over the door here, over the mirror, over to that wall. I just absolutely love this plant. This one is also on wheels in a ceramic container. Again, it's a larger pot. This one I'd say I probably water every 3 to 4 weeks, and it does really thrive with the grow light. I don't think this would be growing as fast as it is without being right next to the grow lights. And then these are my last 2 houseplants. So this is a division of the Silver Bay Aglaonema in the other room. And when you divide a plant, I might have a video. If I do, I'll link it down below. But you basically just cut the root ball and divide the plant like you would for a plant outdoors, like a hosta, for example. And I have had this now in here for I think a couple years. So it's definitely much larger than it was. But again, it's nice to have free plants if you can propagate them from plants that you already have. And then the last one, which I also love, is the asparagus fern. It's just so wispy and cute, and I love it on my desk, and it is sitting on another glass plate. This I saw, where did I see it? Was it at a hair salon or a nail salon? They had one on their shelves that was huge and just like trailing over everything, and it was so beautiful. I took a picture, I found one, and I got it for myself. This one does need a little bit more water as well. I'd say this one and then my ivy do appreciate a little bit more water, but she's just thriving too. She's not surprisingly growing towards the grow light, which is actually helpful because then it does leave my desk space a little bit more empty. However, I wouldn't mind if it just spread across everything in this room. But I think, just looking around here, those are all of the houseplants that I have. So that's a tour of all my houseplants. Again, it's been a journey. But it's been a very similar journey to the garden, where I went from wanting to try every single thing I could to really narrowing it down and focusing on the plants that I know work the best for me. A few other things I wanted to mention. My grow lights are on timers, which is fantastic, so I don't need to turn them on and off or worry about them when I'm out of town. Same thing with the grow lights for my seedlings. Once I get those started, those are also on timers. I would say if you're starting off, maybe go with the ZZ plant, or the pothos or philodendron if you want something that will trail or climb. I'm looking at the Red Emerald right now. I cannot wait to have the walls covered in plants. I do love the garden more, probably because it's an outside activity, But the houseplants I appreciate because of how they make me feel when I come into the room. They are green in the middle of winter when nothing outside is. So I do tend to them mostly in the winter. I will prune them more in the winter. I will stake them if I need to, or repot them in the winter. But these, again, have all thrived through my neglect during the garden season. So let me know if you have any questions. I will post down, I used to make houseplant content before gardening took over my life. But if I do have any videos from early on and they're not completely terrible quality, I will link those down below. Let me know if you have any questions on anything that I've showed you in this video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.